From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Hello and welcome. Our guests today are Adrienne Elrod and Ben Domenech. And on that note, we will go to our first issue. Issue 1, no second counsel.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions disappointed President Trump on Thursday when he defended not appointing a second special counsel to investigate possible FBI misconduct. Instead, Sessions has tasked a senior federal prosecutor, John Huber, to consider whether the FBI mishandled investigations into former Trump campaign official Carter Page and into possible Clinton Foundation links with a Russian nuclear energy agency. A second special counsel would have worked astride special counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating possible Trump campaign collusion with Russia. And note this, Russia retaliated this week to the recent U.S. decision to expel 60 Russian diplomats and close its Seattle consulate. How did Putin do so? By closing the U.S. consulate in St. Petersburg, his home city, and expelling, you guessed it, 60 U.S. diplomats.
Pat, was it a mistake for Jeff Sessions not to appoint a second counsel?
I think he did what he thinks is the right thing, but there's no doubt he scheduled a conflict with the base of with the Trump base, and that the Trump base truly believes that Chris Steele dealt with Russian intelligence agents. They worked up a dirty dossier. They fed it to the FBI to bring down Trump, and it really deserves an investigation. And this will mean that Mueller's investigation, in effect, goes ahead of the other investigation. So I think there's going to be real trouble between Sessions and the White House and the president and Sessions.
Well, there is an investigation. He appointed the U.S. attorney in Utah to look into it, a very respected person who was first nominated by President Obama and then re-nominated by President Trump. So I think it's good that Sessions is standing up against the wingnuts in the Republican Party, frankly. But in terms of the expulsion of diplomats, it's mainly tit for tat, and so I don't think
it's not Cold War too.
No, exactly. Okay. But the fact that the administration closed the consulate in Seattle suggests to me, why Seattle? Boeing, probably industrial espionage. So there's a lot going on here beneath the surface, and the fact that President Trump doesn't really articulate any of this. This is the administration acting, the deep state in the administration, not with President Trump's imprimatur.
Ben?
Both Pat and Eleanor are wrong, and here's why. First off, the reason that I think that this actually is a play that is enjoyed and supported by Senator Grassley is because you have the ability now to impanel grand juries in Utah, not in D.C., which means that you are, frankly, in friendlier territory from their perspective to advance this process as opposed to what they would have to go through in the D.C. circuit. I think that also you're going to see additional focus on Andrew McCabe in particular, in which the sort of criminal side of things is already proceeding in terms of recommendations on that front. In addition, I think that this act by in terms of response from the Russians is not an insignificant one, in the sense that it's the first time that you really see this administration and the Russian government coming into very direct conflict. The fact of the matter is that we have this revisionist history about the Obama administration and their relationship with Russia, in which somehow they were standing up to the Russians. In the fact of the matter is that they didn't. They didn't in Syria, they didn't after Crimea, they didn't actually take significant steps. This administration, even if it isn't inconsistent with the president, has taken actual steps. Now there is some back and forth between the two.
Adrienne.
Yeah, look, I mean, I want to focus more on Pete Sessions not appointing a special counsel to this. I think this is something that Trump wanted for a long time. I don't know if he's actually going to be able to survive yet again this decision. But what I think we saw from Attorney General Sessions on this decision to have a U.S. attorney look into it, as opposed to appointing a second special counsel, which is, by the way, in my view, a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think what you're seeing is Sessions saying, you know what, I want to remain as Attorney General, but I also want to protect the integrity of the Justice Department. That is my top priority here. So if Trump fires me, so be it. We have not seen a tweet yet from the president on this. We'll see if it happens by tomorrow morning.
I can't believe Trump, that is really a big move if he moved out Sessions. First, to get a new Attorney General to replace him, he's got to go through the Senate. First requirement placed on the new Attorney General would be, you have to protect Mr. Mueller.
No, so there's more tension coming between the two, but they'll probably stay in place.
Okay.
Right.
Very good. Well, we'll go on to our next issue, which is issue 2, So Long Shockin.
President Trump this week fired his Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin, adding another name to a growing list of administration dismissals. The president has nominated his military doctor, Rear Admiral Ronnie Jackson, to replace Shulkin at the Department of Veterans Affairs. But while the Inspector General's office has recently criticized Shulkin for a 9-day trip to Europe in which he and his wife spent $122,000 on, quote, sightseeing and other unofficial activities, unquote, Shulkin says he has been unfairly targeted. In an article in the New York Times on Wednesday, Shulkin decried what he describes as a Washington environment that is, quote, toxic, chaotic, disrespectful, and subversive, end quote. Still, it's clear the Veterans Affairs Department continues to face grave challenges. Just this month, an Inspector General report found a major Washington area hospital had major shortcomings in cleanliness, staffing levels, and had perhaps spent $92 million on unnecessary purchases.
Eleanor, let me see if I can get this question out better than the first one. Was the firing of Shulkin correct? And secondly, is the VA fit for purpose?
Shulkin was doing a good job. It is an enormous bureaucracy. It's a hospital system with a lot of problems. He was making headway. He very stupidly did what a lot of other Trump cabinet officials are doing, and that is he took some Wimbledon tickets and didn't pay for his wife on a trip to Europe. And emails have surfaced among the political appointees in the Veterans Administration Department that they saw his ethics violation as a way to drive him out. He was resisting full privatization. There are a lot of entities that stand to benefit if the VA is privatized, namely the Koch brothers and their Concerned Veterans for America. No, I think it's a bad idea.
You know, in some cases, look, the veterans will benefit if they don't have to drive 100 miles or 200 miles to a VA hospital and get a voucher and go to hospital in their own town. So in some cases, this privatization, I think, is a very good idea.
Some of it, but not entirely. And then appointing the president's personal doctor, who's a very nice man, but runs a kind of an urgent care clinic in the White House of 40 people. I think they just want to install him as a figurehead so that the political appointees can take over. But he's going to have to do a lot of homework for his confirmation hearing, or he could be as embarrassed as he should have been after that press conference in which he lauded President Trump's great genes and said he would live to be 200.
Adrienne, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I think Eleanor is exactly right here. I think Ronnie is going to have a really difficult time getting confirmed by the Senate. He has no managerial experience. He is, you know, the yes man essentially for the president's health. I mean, he went out there, I think he quoted him as saying that he was 1 pound below the obesity weight. So I think he's going to have a really difficult time. There are so many problems at the VA. These have been ongoing problems that, you know, are irrelevant of who the president of the United States is. But that is why you got to have someone in there who's got real experience, who can get in there, hit the ground running, and figure this how to solve these problems.
Ben.
We should always consider the possibility that we are led by idiots. In this case, Shulkin was given a rubber stamp by the U.S. Senate. He was viewed as a bipartisan choice, as an inheritor of Obama. I disagree with Eleanor. I think he was doing a terrible job. I do not think that he was fit for this. In fact, the thing that I was hearing mostly from the military community in the wake of this firing was that the travel was the least of the reasons to fire him. It was a very Washington reason, but not justified. And simply as a matter of personal experience with this, coming from a military family, their experience with the VA is simply awful. And most recently,
hear these horror stories.
Most recently, just as an example of this, my brother-in-law received a call the other day that the evaluation he had received from the VA 3 months ago had been lost completely. They've completely lost his file. They'll have to do it all over again.
The point is, and it's correct, that scandals are inherent in this massive bureaucratic institution. All these hospitals, one after another, is going to happen. It's going to happen on Ronnie's watch as it did on Shulkin's watch.
Should they make it easier to fire people in the Veterans Affairs Administration who are failing veterans?
Now you want to bump up against the civil service protections?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I think that that's what Shulkin was doing, and he just removed some people at the top of some of the troubled hospitals. You know, all the veterans associations, except for the one that's funded by the Koch brothers, support Shulkin and say that he'd been making headway. So I do think this is about the drive for privatization. This is a political ideology that has basically driven him out of office. He really didn't get much of a chance to defend against his ethical charges.
You've twice brought up.
Not fully.
You have twice brought up this.
They've done some things that are correct, and I agree with them. Legislation co-sponsored by Bernie Sanders and John McCain.
You've twice brought up this Koch organization, which is quite small and doesn't really speak for any large group of veterans. But I have to tell you, Eleanor, the veterans groups are the problem here. They're the ones that actually, they're competing against each other for their own particular interests, and they prevent the kind of reforms that are necessary for a system like this. Whether you support privatization or not, the fact is this is a system that does not serve veterans well and needs to change.
I'm not going to blame the veterans.
All right, well, let's go on to our third issue. Issue 3, Third Intifada.
At least several Palestinians were killed and hundreds wounded on Friday as thousands of protesters marched on Israeli border checkpoints. The protesters are calling for Palestinian families they say were unlawfully dispossessed by Israel to be able to reclaim land on Israeli soil. Still, some analysts say that the bloodshed is simply a sign of more chaos to come. Your moderator agrees and believes 3 key factors are in play here. First, the increasing confidence of Hamas in combination with common Palestinian disillusionment towards President Abbas's Fatah-led government in Ramallah, West Bank. Second, the increasing dependence of Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel on hardliners in his coalition government. Third, the Trump administration's failure thus far to present a credible peace plan.
Who's to blame?
I think this has been planned a long time. I predicted it a week ago, and it's going to continue up until May 15th, which is the 70th anniversary of the birth of Israel, Napka to the Palestinians. Yep. So I think if they can sustain it in Gaza, and this spills over into the West Bank, I think Israel's in a real danger of being isolated, as is the United States, and all the plans have been worked out in the White House with the Saudis and the rest of them. Puts real pressure on them.
Well, President Trump declaring that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel did not help matters, and relations have deteriorated in that area ever since that December pronouncement. So, and the president claims he has a new peace plan that they're going to be presenting at the UN. You know, that's not going to go anywhere. So I think the whole situation is in a shambles, and it wasn't great. It hasn't been great for a long time, but President Trump has managed to make it worse.
Ben, don't you think, I mean, what is the Israelis supposed to do, right? They've got to defend their territory, and you do have people, you've got to defend your territory, right?
I think that this is actually making a mountain out of a molehill. The reality is that this is about jockeying internally within the Palestinians, understanding that Abbas is going to die soon, could drop dead any day now, and the fact is that they are internally jockeying about sort of what their leadership looks like next. The biggest story about Israel, frankly, from the past a couple of months in terms of their relationships under the Trump administration is how well they are getting along with other Arab nations in the Middle East who have, in the wake of the Obama administration's decision that empowered Iran in the area, have actually seen their own interests come into alignment. The Saudis, the Jordanians, and UAE and others are actually looking at Israel in a much more friendly light these days. And I think that that's one of the most positive developments for the region.
Israel is an ally against Iran.
Yeah, it's interesting. Exactly. Adrienne, what do you think, though, about this Palestinian issue in particular?
Well, I think, I think that going back to the United States' role in this, I mean, we used to have the president has had a long time role by tradition in the United States of brokering or trying to broker the peace process here. And you simply can't do that now with President Trump saying that Jerusalem is the capital. Jared Kushner, having his hands in 20 different things, even though he says that this is like his biggest project.
Do you think Kushner's peace plan is dead, or is it coming?
I don't think it ever really started in the first place. I'm not sure that it really ever existed in the first place, but I do think it's a problem. I think that this was a short-sighted decision by President Trump to placate to the right-wing part of his base, and now we're seeing the repercussions.
I think it's more serious than Ben indicates. It's more than just nothing. You got 16 dead. I mean, this makes Selma Bridge and Kent State look like nothing. 750 wounded on Good Friday. And if this continues, if they can sustain it, which I'm not sure they can in Gaza, I mean, all over the Middle East, this is going to affect the masses. It's not going to affect the elites.
I mean, that's the populism.
Exactly. You don't want the violence sustained, but you do want their resistance to be noticed. And I think that Israel should take notice.
I mean, I think one thing though that is interesting, and in defense of the Israeli Defense Forces here, is that those slingshots with which the Palestinians throw rocks, you get hit by one of those rocks on the head. I mean, the Israelis, you've got to defend yourself.
Tell it to Goliath. Took one in the head.
Okay, well, some people would see it slightly differently, maybe. But I mean, there is this broader issue, right?
Smooth stones.
Right.
Yeah.
That Mohammed bin Salman and the Sunni Arab alignment because of Iran.
Yeah, but as long as Netanyahu is in power, you're not going to get any kind of a peace deal, and certainly not one that's going to give the Palestinians a fair
and
shake.
Hamas in power.
Exactly.
I mean, Hamas doesn't want
I think the
peace.
two-state solution is dead.
You do?
Well,
Okay.
but the alternative is worse. So
Exactly.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. 3 different leaders, maybe it'll come. Anyway, when we come back, Sacramento's shootings and Amazon taxes. And tell your friends they can watch us anytime from Sunday 1 p.m. Eastern at our website, McLaughlin.com. We'll see you in a minute.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by Eric.org. Is your company trying to provide health and retirement benefits to workers across the country? The ERISA Industry Committee beats back taxes, mandates, and compliance burdens that make it harder for companies to provide employee benefits. Learn how Eric supports large employers at Eric.org.
Issue 4, Sacramento shooting.
Protests continued across the nation this week in relation to the March 18th death of Stephen Clark in Sacramento, California. While in his grandparents' backyard, 22-year-old Clark was shot and killed by police officers who say they mistook his cell phone for a firearm. The police officers who confronted Clark did so after responding to reports of a male suspect breaking into cars. While Clark has convictions for felony domestic violence and robbery, his family say he was no longer engaged in criminal activity. Responding to community tensions, however, California Attorney General Xavier Becerra says his voice is now overseeing the police investigation of the shooting.
Adrienne, should Becerra have involved himself in this investigation?
Yeah, I think he should have, because first of all, this was a request by the police chief in Sacramento. He wanted the state to get involved
Well, that's
in
what they
this.
say. Do you believe him?
Yeah, I have no reason to not believe him. And secondly, these are pervasive issues that I think cannot be, unlike what President Trump says, they cannot be decided on by localities. You've got to have a higher government institution involved in this process, because you do have so much community discern, especially when there are shootings of black men, which we're unfortunately seeing too much of this country. So I think absolutely he should be.
the
involved.
autopsy that was ordered by the family showed that he'd been shot
Six
seven
times
times
in
in the back.
But we have the video of it.
And there's, the cops claimed he was lunging at them and waving something, which turned out to be a cell phone. And so their account doesn't seem to be correct.
It does
But
look, there are real questions about it, but what in heaven's name do we need to make this a national issue for? Is there any reason to believe that Sacramento can't deal with this, or the state of California if they want to? What do we? You
Well, the
think
protests make
you
it a
think
national
Jeff
issue, don't
Sessions
they?
has got to go out there and get involved
If it
to
was
straighten this
if it-
all
The
out?
protests are a
If it was a
concern.
one-time event, you'd say, why does the
But
national
all-
have, there is a pattern of
But
this
I
kind
know
of
that-
behavior by
but
police
Michael
departments.
Brown was the cop
Exactly.
was innocent. Eric Garner, the cops were not convicted. Even Trayvon Martin, it showed that George Zimmerman wasn't convicted. So it's not all. This does look like a very bad
This
shoot.
is why
And
we need
but why
Black
do you-
Lives Matter,
Okay,
because
let Black Lives Matter go to Sacramento.
Black Lives Matter people have spoken out, and the machinery in California needs to go through an investigation. But this is a matter that should concern all of us, because it reflects a
But who-
pervasive
who should get
racism
involved?
in
Exactly.
society.
But we have to, I actually think that the real story here is about the half century of decline that we've seen in faith in the courts and in the cops. The fact is that we look to these people now not as policemen who are there to serve and protect communities, but rather as people who go into communities and frequently get away with incredibly
But, you know,
irresponsible
But isn't-
action.
but-
With
and
due
what no,
respect-
and this is not a question simply of race. This is a question of responsibility on the part of officers across the country. There are officers that we see over and over again who do not train the way that they are required to, who do not perform the way that they are required to, and when they do things like this, get away without being indicted, without actually being convicted of anything.
Sometimes they're not guilty. Look,
Right.
No, that's also true. But
the cops today are far better trained and they behave far better. Do they make mistakes? Sure. Than when I was growing up, the time of Bull Connor and all that. I mean, look. I mean, these guys.
I agree that it's better. I agree that it's better.
But
that doesn't mean
constant beating up on the cops. Most of the kids and most of the folks killed in these inner cities are black kids, and they're killed by other black kids. They're not killed by cops.
But Eleanor, let me ask you as well.
We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the broader issue. We're talking specifically about the pattern of too many unarmed black men being killed by police.
Let me ask
that
you a
is the
question,
issue.
though. But if we look at this police footage, for example, I think we have to be careful, don't we, in the sense that they had the reports. We've only seen one element here. It's very dark. They're concerned about being shot. And ultimately, you know, the objective investigation, police officers put their lives on it's a very difficult job.
Right. And an investigation may conclude that they had reason because of their cultural beliefs that they genuinely felt that that their life was in danger. And when you put on, when you put on a uniform, one of the policemen was black, one was white. They're both they're blue, and that's more important. This is not about the race of the policeman who fired the shots, but why do they fire multiple shots into a body that's already on the ground? They used him as target practice.
Exactly. No, I think that's unfair.
But every single week it seems like we have a new story of cops behaving in an irresponsible and an egregious manner that frequently results in the death of unarmed civilians.
But frequently results in acquittals in court as well.
Exactly, but I think that is one of the things that has degraded trust in the cops.
When you have massive amounts of violent crimes and cops having to deal with every one of them, very often pulling their guns, you're going to have these kinds of accidents.
All right, we need to go on.
If he was a white kid, I don't know that they would have sent that many policemen after him. They wouldn't have had a helicopter hovering overwood.
We need to go on. Yeah, well, and I do think one of the things people have to consider is that sometimes the people calling for more police officers are black mothers, and that speaks to something as well. But anyway, issue 5, taxing the web.
Battling online retail giant Amazon this week, President Trump claimed that the firm pays insufficient taxes and undercuts small businesses. But is Trump right? Well, according to a 2017 New York Times report, quote, S&P Global Market Intelligence found that Amazon paid an average tax rate covering federal, state, local, and foreign taxes of 13% between 2007 and 2015, end quote. The Times notes that this is a lower effective rate than Standard & Poor's 500 stock average tax rate of 26.9%. Still, if Amazon were to face new taxes, its tens of millions of US users might not be so happy.
I put in a lot of facts there because we had a viewer who said I don't put in enough figures. So, Adrienne, what do you think, though? Amazon should be paying more taxes?
I actually don't think they should be paying more taxes, and I think President Trump getting involved in this issue is actually bad for him because a lot of his supporters want cheap products. And I think anytime he gets involved and says, actually, I want Amazon to pay more taxes, that's going to drive up the cost of products, and that's going to negatively affect his base.
Well, I would agree. I mean, I would agree to a point, but I do think Amazon's got to pay the going sales tax rate in the states.
Right.
And do they really free ride off the Postal Service? There's an argument that they don't. They pay plenty. I think it ought to be looked into.
Yeah, if they stop using the Postal Service would suffer.
Yet again.
And my mailman's gone.
Right. Well, the reason the president has gone after Amazon is because it's Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Bezos also owns the Washington Post. So there's a grudge match going on here as well.
The president is wrong about the tax issue, but he's actually correct about the Postal Service issue. A Citibank analysis that was done last year found that Amazon ought to actually be paying about $1.46 more on every package that they send versus what they currently pay the Postal Service because of some internal regulations that they have. That's something that I think ought to be changed because Amazon should pay its fair share. But when it comes to the tax issue, the president's incorrect. Amazon does collect the taxes that they legally owe.
Anyone else have anything?
Yeah, the president has also said a number of things about Amazon sort of devouring of shopping malls and killing mom and pop businesses, which I think we can all relate to.
Sure.
But it's a wonderful service.
It's like Walmart.
But
There's nothing you can do about it, but that's what what
near
it's doing.
monopoly.
Exactly.
It's a near monopoly, and maybe antitrust laws could come into play at some point.
Soon they will bring you everything by drone. And it won't be fun.
All right, well, let me ask a very quick question, yes or no. If there was a Trumpazon, a Trump Amazon company, would you use it, yes or no?
I always go to whoever's cheaper.
Pat?
I'd check out to see how it was
Yes or
doing.
no? Yes.
That's an easy no.
Easy no, too.
Easy no.
Yeah.
Maybe is my answer. Anyway, we'll be right back with predictions.
Generation Hope is a nonprofit organization that helps DC area teen moms and dads become college graduates. We provide them with tuition assistance, one-on-one mentoring, and crisis support until they graduate. Crises along the way, there have already been a lot of crises.
My mom passed away, and I do everything for my mom in memory of her. I dedicate this graduation to her on Mother's Day.
When a young parent earns their college degree, the likelihood that that child will go to college goes up, and they will earn $1 million more over the course of their lifetime.
Naraya Omar.
It's a tremendous return on investment. And all of these issues that we care about, homelessness, child welfare, poverty, this really makes a difference and it changes lives.
Congratulations. Have a wonderful weekend.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you in part by Eric.org. With gridlock in Washington, states are stepping in to mandate paid sick and family leave policies, creating a compliance nightmare for companies with a nationwide workforce. The ERISA Industry Committee is fighting back. Learn how we can help your company at Eric.org.
Predictions, Pat?
These problems in Gaza, they've really been planned and prepared for a long time. I don't know if they can sustain it with the kinds of casualties they've got, but I think it's going to go on. I think it's going to be very, very damaging.
Eleanor?
The impact of the Parkland survivors and the movement that they have ignited will continue, and we saw evidence of the power of that when David Hogg, one of the students, turned a Twitter war with a Fox News host into a approach to advertisers, causing several advertisers to drop out in 24 hours. Their knowledge of how social media works is going to be their driving force as they continue.
Ben?
The Parkland teens who this week suggested that senators like my father-in-law who accept money from the NRA are spattered with the blood of children will receive significant consideration this fall as recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize. And if they can manage to not drone any of their opponents in the meantime, they will deserve it more than Barack Obama.
And we send your father-in-law the best great American. Adrienne?
So I'm going to shift away from politics and actually talk about sports. My prediction is that Villanova goes all the way. I also hope that this happens for the sake of my brackets.
Very good, very good. Okay. On that note, I predict that Iran, the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, will attack a U.S. or allied vessel in the Persian Gulf in the coming weeks. They will do so to test the U.S. resolve after the Iran nuclear deal. Is Trump going to change it? And here's a random fact. 100 years ago today, the Royal Air Force was formed. My other grandfather, Wing Commander Harry Kerr, served his nation in the Coastal Command of the RAF and Bomber Command during World War II. He was also the first RAF officer to land on a US Navy carrier, which is a lovely little anecdote there. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much, panelists, for an enjoyable discussion. And I hope everyone will go and Google Wing Commander Harry Kerr, and you can see photos of him. But we hope you'll join us next week. And until then, make sure to follow us on Twitter at McLaughlin Group. Make sure to do that. And visit McLaughlin.com where your friends can watch this show. Anyway, we'll see you later.